after getting a chronic illness that like this is my time. My health got worse when I was focusing on the business, which is not surprising. And so I realized I needed to make that shift.
At some point as a leader, I'm kind of like, this is crazy. Like I run global businesses. I am sleep deprived. I am running like, burning the stick in both ends. And who's suffering from that?
Right.
It's me. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special episode at Duque. Our last couple episodes around transitions have been really, really popular. And so I wanted to bring another special episode here to talk about how do you navigate through transitions, and especially shifting your approach to work and life. And joining me is a good friend of mine, Patricia Collins. Patty, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So for all of those who are listening, just tell a little bit about yourself and your background. You and I had met when we were both working together at IBM, but you have had a storied career, not just at IBM, but tell a little bit of our listeners around kind of like, what do you do and your background?
Wow. So I am a marketing expert. I have a specialty in growth strategy and account-based marketing, and I've grown global corporations and transformed marketing models for, over 15 years. And so, yeah, I'm a marketing, I guess you could say, guru in a sense. I just have this innate talent for growing businesses, especially emerging technology.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And so I know today you're here to talk a little bit about your personal insights on leadership transitions, as you have personally gone through one yourself, and have some really exciting things kind of coming up out of your own personal transition and what you're building next. So, so I'm sure many listeners here are curious about your journey. So can you share us a little bit of your personal journey? What sparked this transition and transformation in your life?
Wow. A number of different things. Working at IBM for about 6 years, I really fulfilled a lot of dreams of, working in emerging markets and growing teams and bridging teams, right? Bridging business and technical teams together. And it was a huge passion of mine. And I felt like I reached a plateau at IBM where I had done so many things, transformed so many different teams. And it was time for me to take the next step for me. And, serving what's best for me, right? I was kind of the intrapreneur at IBM, and now I really wanted to work for myself. And, I consulted C-suite executive leaders on growth. I think it was time for me to grow, grow my own business, right? And be my own leader and my own owner, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that what you're saying. It was time for you to kind of grow your own business and be your own leader. And I think a lot of it was you and I had talk was about how you're basically rethinking about how you define success beyond just kind of these internal metrics that are put on from a corporation. Can you tell me a little bit about what, that shift for you? What are those internal, external metrics that kind of shifted in your journey that got you to a point of saying, I'm done with the corporations and I'm here, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and build my own business?
So what I found, especially in the corporate world, there was a disconnect between the self or the emotional or internal mindset and metrics and building the business. And there was always a disconnect. Corporations don't see that there's value there, and that if your mindset is not aligned with what you want internally, right? What your strategies are, what your goals are, it's not going to grow the business, right? And I felt that there was a disconnect in that kind of realm. And when I would talk to leaders, they just didn't understand. You need to make sure that this person is passionate. They love what they're doing. And so I found that there was a white space that was really sorely missing. But also, corporations would build their business. And I feel sometimes the employee gets kind of lost in that, right? And their goals aren't prioritized as well. So that's where I was I wanted to work with individuals that, needed that support to grow within a company, but also position themselves as, a high value their own CEO of their own company, basically, their own brand.
Yeah.
And I did it myself, and I just want to empower people to do that as well.
Yeah. It's super interesting, right? Because in IBM, you were a lot in the technology side, but also the consulting business.
Yes.
I've been in consulting for a really long time, and there is about like the importance of building your brand, what you want to be known for, more internally as well as externally. That's like a huge part of being a consultant and building kind of your network. And some of the things that I struggled with as I started to climb up on the ladder is like that balance between authenticity and well-being.
Yes.
And so that was really hard. And I think there were so many different kind of iterations, particularly in the pandemic, that really called attention to certain aspects of me, my personality, myself, that I've never really called attention to. And it was really forcing me to come at a point of, vulnerability and authenticity. And strangely enough, as I start to find myself, showing up as that more vulnerable and very authentic leader, a lot of people kind of gravitated to me more.
Yes.
But there were a lot of people, in leadership positions that were really threatened by that level of authenticity. And then I think what was also part of that extra struggle was well-being. The constant pressure of the metrics constantly coming back in, where a lot of the things that, you thought mattered in terms of leadership and personal relationships were really not really part of what you're being measured on as a leader, because they were all business metrics. So I know that you've gone through your own struggles around and have dealt with a lot of people, and we've talked a lot about. Talk to me a little bit about kind of like your journey as you were starting to kind of balance and transition out, this idea of authenticity and kind of well-being and that road.
Yeah, it's a fine line because you're trying to balance your well-being and you're trying to meet the needs of the business, and being authentic sometimes falls on deaf ears, sometimes is not welcome. So it's a fine balance. And what I realized is my well-being was suffering because I was pursuing the needs of the business and not really looking at like what are my goals, but also, where's my well-being in that? I somewhat lost myself. And then I realized, after getting a chronic illness that like, this is my time. My health got worse when I was focusing on the business, which is not surprising. And so I realized I needed to make that shift. And the best thing to do was to start my own business. And I felt if I'm going through this, right, I'm sure there are many others going through that. And I found like just by starting this business, like people are coming to me all the time saying, I'm dealing with a chronic illness, but yet I'm like, the CEO of an agency and I don't know how to balance the two, right?
Yeah.
So I'm finding that there's more of us than not. And then I found an interesting factoid about Olympians. They all deal with chronic illnesses, and yet they're achieving the highest thing they could achieve within their industry.
Correct.
So it's just extraordinary to me. And so I want to be there to support and uplift people and have them meet their well-beings, right? And not sacrifice that for business, but also be successful and grow their business. So have that balance. But having done it, I feel like I'm in a great position to help others.
No, I think that's really great. And I think taking the example of what you said about Olympians, I think any sort of kind of like elite level athlete, or like for me, like in my world, elite level classical musicians, I think what people don't really understand is the level of sacrifice that individuals go through in order to achieve those types of results.
Yes.
It is very, very monastic in what you have to do. It's what you live in and day out for one moment, for one event. And then after you've achieved that, there's a little bit of like, well, how do you kind of calibrate back to life? What kind of matters? How do you kind of live within like those normalcies? And so, what does that also level of success mean that translates into, leadership, right? As people look at you as kind of role models. And I think there's a lot of, kind of like, to your point, it's not maybe just chronic illness from a physical perspective too, but a lot of mental illness that has to be like, addressed. And there's a lot of Olympians that have been very, very vocal about that. And so as we start to think about that level of professional parallel in like corporate America, right? Like I think there is a lot of personal awakening related to leadership at the executive level that is happening post-pandemic.
Yes. Agreed.
That is going into like changing the meaning of what it looks like to be working. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a 7-Eleven job.
Right.
You know, the 24 hours. So I mean, and you've worked with a lot of leaders. Can you talk a little bit about like what are the struggles? What are these moments that you're seeing with a lot of people that you've worked with? You know, that are leading towards these personal awakenings at the leadership level.
Yeah, it's so funny. Some of them are burnt out. Some of them they're putting out fires at like, you know, the tactical level with their team because their team can't, you know, find their way out of a paper bag, or it's you know, being there for their bosses, right, and making sure that they're aligned with what they're doing. And it basically comes from being, you know, dissatisfied with where they're at, and also burnout. And I find that people are like ready for a change, ready to take back their ownership of their career, and not be beholden to another entity.
It's super interesting, right? Because like we've seen it, you know, we've seen a massive jump in unemployment during the pandemic, right? Just situationally of what was going on. And then post-pandemic, there's been a lot of people in a lot of industries where people haven't come back. And there is a little bit of that. And so I think we're way far off the post-pandemic chart right now, but we're really going into this world of AI, especially in this last year where so many people are getting laid off. But it's kind of like, where are people going? What you know, I think a lot of people are being faced with these types of self-realization, right? Of trying to figure out, you know, that balance between authenticity, living their full life, living life in wholeness, and then what does job mean? Where does purpose kind of go in? I think you're seeing a trend in that type of leadership and that kind of conversation. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely fair to say. And it's interesting, right? I mean, it's you know, and I find that a lot of leaders, they're working, you know, like 10 to 7 or whatever, and they're working, you know, the jobs of 3, and they're trying to, you know, figure out like, well, what's next for me, right? It can't be sustained. And they find that the leadership like trainings and like how companies view leadership is so outdated, and they've moved beyond that. And I was in the same role. Like I moved beyond these staid old-fashioned leadership styles, and I was looking for something new. And that's what a lot of people are experiencing.
I think I probably experienced it a little bit sooner. Ellen Sarah's like 2 years old. It's so unbelievable to me that it's 2 years old.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But and it's not just Ellen Sarah. It's also the other lines of businesses that I've been able to open as an entrepreneur. And to really redefine success for me, it's just not about kind of like the results of what you achieve from, you know, bringing in revenue and profit and loss. But it, to me personally, it is about integrity and wholeness. And so that was so much about a huge part of my DNA, so much a part of like my purpose. But that was so much of what I felt I couldn't show up to in the last job, and where like the demands of what the next role in leadership was demanding to me was a loss of authenticity, a loss of kind of, you know, this kind of level of wholeness and my ability to kind of show up my best self. And so I think there is a lot about like becoming whole as a leader. And I know like you emphasize a lot of that importance. Can you expand on that as well?
So, it all comes down to, like you had mentioned, right, authenticity. And I find that it gets lost within the senior levels because there's a business strategy involved. And so what you believe, right, how the business should be driven, the executive suite or the the board members don't believe the same thing. So there's, you know, there can be somewhat of a disconnect, and there tends to be with senior leaders a retraction in their views, and they kind of don't want to be authentic for fear of you know, being rejected or not seeing their point of view and not being aligned with the executive team, right? You need to be aligned in order to grow the business, in order to grow your career.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're not in that same kind of thinking, but then there's also that, for you not to be authentic, how does that affect your well-being, your mindset going in, and your growth moving forward? Maybe it's not the right company for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just like because a lot of people, I'm one of them, you stay in a company because it's comfortable.
Right.
But and leaving is fearful and change is scary. But what's on the other end could be like extraordinary, like a chance of a lifetime.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different mind shifts that happen.
Yeah. I mean, the comfort of a paycheck was the first thing that was really, really terrifying.
Yes.
I would say. I think the second piece is just to your point, you get kind of routine and you can't really see somewhere else, and it's hard for you to kind of see what the opportunities are, right? After being in that kind of level of comfort, and the balance of kind of authenticity and what the demands of the business are. It's kind of, I lived in New York for 15 years. You and I are both ex-New Yorkers. So I think about it now that we're both in California, it was just like at the very early part of my career, there was a badge of the hustle around the fact that I stayed up all night. I was doing this deck. I was running around.
That's
and
right.
It's like, there's a very New York, very ambition driven kind of mindset. And then at some point as a leader, I'm kind of like, this is crazy. I run global businesses. I am sleep deprived. I am running burning the stick in both ends. And who's suffering from that?
Right.
It's me. And then the question really is that I had to myself, am I showing up at my best self this way? And the answer is no. I'm not showing up my best self if I'm sleep deprived and I'm haggard. And so it was also another changing point for me. It was like, if I prioritize sleep, if I prioritize my health, does that allow me to show up at my best self and actually produce better work? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
And then I took that even a step further, kind of like even in my story as an entrepreneur, my story, my career, and it is, who am I surrounding myself with? Who are the people around me? Who are my business partners? Who are my sponsors? Am I surrounding myself with the people who have the best intention of allowing me to show up as my best self? Because that's really important. And I have to say, starting my own business and my company, I've gone through my own evolutions of what that looks like from my team and my partners. And just today, we had our partner meeting and we were laughing for an hour. And I just could say, guys, is anyone else having fun? Because then it allows everyone to show up as your best self. And when you do, and that's when the business comes in. And that's where really all the fun begins. And that's what it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And I think you can't quite disconnect your professional self to what's going on personal. Everything is kind of all connected.
Yes.
And so I think the whole point around being a leader right now is it's kind of recalibrating reinvention.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember those days, right, being in bed at 11 o'clock at night, trying to get through a deck or, finish a final report. I've been there. And it's, and I see a bigger picture, and I know it's, been bounced around in the multiple industries for years, but happy employees makes a hugely profitable company. Yeah. And there's evidence out there with a number of large global firms that have done that, right? Where they took the time to see, what is the sentiment of our employees? How are they doing? Are they enjoying their roles? Are they happy and fulfilled, or are they miserable and working 9 to 5 and then punching out at 5? So there's a bigger picture here. And yes, you're absolutely right. Everything is connected. Your mind, your physical being, how you present yourself, it's all interconnected. And that's what I think. None of I realized just in IoT, right? Just in technology, everything is connected. And then I'm like, wait a minute, but physically we're connected to these technologies as well. So totally.
It's a lot, right? To go through from your perspective from a transition, the challenge of being completely burned out and not being challenged anymore, not seeing kind of the next path. You've hit a dead end on top of burnout. So then and then on top of that, you add this level of having a chronic illness. That's really tough
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people like even understand it. Post-pandemic, the number of people that are suffering from chronic illness and autoimmune diseases, it's amazing to me that, you know, so many people around us are pretending or faking being well.
Yes. Yes.
And that's really tough. It's kind of one of those gifts from the pandemic where there is an increase of that. And so like all of those together is like the perfect storm that allowed you to kind of see through something really exciting. And so without further ado, again, Patty, what's next for you? What's the direction that you're heading to?
Well, I'm really excited. I'm starting a new company in January. We're going to be launching to delve into these challenges that people have, and to, you know, really grow who they are and grow not personally but professionally, and be happy with their talents and to grow themselves to the next level. That's what I'm really looking for. And, you know, but doing that with creating well-being mentally and physically, and not sacrificing that. You can have both. So I'm really excited about it.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is a really huge announcement. Being an entrepreneur myself, that is a huge announcement. It takes a lot of risk, but I'm super excited about the company that you're launching in January. Just with the sound bites that you're giving us, and I know that you're building towards that big announcement. I'm excited that your story is going to just impact a lot of lives, and foster a lot of change for a new wave of leadership that is actually really, really desperately needed, especially as we grow into AI. The whole idea that, you know, humanity somewhat is lost, and that it's actually the reverse, is where you actually need more humane, realized leaders that are able to show up in their authenticity and encourage everyone else around them to be authentic and be vulnerable.
Yes, that's the way of the world. That's what's happening moving forward for the future. Anyone that doesn't think that's going to happen, or any companies that don't think that's the way of the future, especially with emotional intelligence, not only artificial intelligence.
Yes.
They're going to be left in the lurch, left
Awesome.
in the past. So,
is there any sort of last words that you want to, or a piece of advice that you want to give any of our listeners here who are going through sort of a transition, or just kind of battling this, you know, this level of anxiety as a leader?
You're not alone. There are resources out there. Myself, I mean, you know, your friends, family. I mean, you're not alone. We're all in this together, despite, you know, some of the societal things that folks have seen. Women are here, men are here. We're all here to support each other. And, you know, I've been hearing inklings of groups being formed around this, which is pretty exciting. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being in a show. And I think it's really, without a doubt, right? I think both of our stories as transitioning out, and, you know, with all of kind of like both personal and professional things kind of coming ahead, and starting our own business, really kind of, you know, there is a lot of things within transition that we need to embrace, because there's a lot of exciting things that really kind of come out from that, you know, level of transition, that takes you into creative paths, and, you know, probably wholeness and leadership is also the other piece that, you know, is what we get out of this. So
absolutely
awesome. Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you, Patty, for being on the show.
Thank you.
I invite all the listeners to please stay tuned for the upcoming announcements for Patty's journey. There's going to be some exciting things in January, so please follow us. Stay tuned to this space for some exciting announcements, obviously, but also really encourage a lot of the listeners here, right? You know, if you're needing recalibration in your lives and your careers, please, you know, obviously reach out to Patty and seek out some of these resources, and definitely stay tuned to this place. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.